So I read one of the most hilarious articles ever. So I'm not going to show much of this. So the case for Paige Beckers over Caitlin Clark is the WNBA's best guard. There is no case for Paige Beckers the WNBA's best guard. There is not. AB's normally very tight-lipped. Me doesn't give much and supported Kelsey Mitchell for MVP twice. You think AB still rocks with Caitlin? Yes, I do.
Watch that reaction carefully. The frustration is real, the disbelief is genuine, and what triggered it? An article making a case that Paige Beckers is a better guard than Caitlin Clark in 2024. Not in potential, not in college recruiting rankings from when they were 17. Right now in the WNBA. And the argument being presented isn't just flimsy, it's built on a foundation that completely rewrites what actually happened on the court. So let's break down why this narrative is not just wrong, but dangerously revisionist.
This article right here, there is actually, what argument is there for Paige being the best guard in the WNBA? What argument is there for Paige Beckers being better than Olivia Miles? What argument is there for Paige being better than Caitlin Clark? Like, when efficiency has the added downside of passiveness, efficiency doesn't matter. You would rather somebody make an aggressive mistake than a passive mistake.
Here's the core problem with efficiency as the primary argument. When efficiency comes packaged with passiveness, it stops being a virtue and becomes a liability. Think about it this way. If there's a wide open teammate under the basket and you have an 80% chance of completing that pass, what's the better player? The one who attempts it and occasionally turns it over, or the one who sees the 20% failure rate and decides not to risk it? Aggressive mistakes versus passive mistakes. One shows up in the stat sheet. The other is invisible but just as costly. And that distinction matters when we're talking about who the best guard in the league is.
Paige is not the better defender. They are both mediocre to below. They're both traffic cones. Neither of them are good defenders. But this is my favorite part about this. I'm not talking about anything. First of all, Paige is better in her role. We are talking, you cannot say better in her role and then say best guard. You cannot. We are not talking about roles. You cannot talk about that when we're talking about best guard.
Now we get to the really problematic part of this argument. The phrase better in her role completely contradicts the claim of best guard. You cannot have it both ways. Either we're evaluating who performs their specific role most effectively, or we're evaluating who the best player is regardless of role. When you say Paige Beckers is better in her role, you're admitting she has limitations that require a specific role. The best guards in WNBA history didn't need qualifiers. Diana Taurasi wasn't the best guard in her role. Sue Bird wasn't elite for her specific system. They were just the best, period. The moment you add qualifiers, you've already conceded the argument.
It seems so little discourse around Clark actually touches on her production, which is why it hasn't gotten coverage. She's taken a big leap this season. So basically, it's basically saying, yeah, Caitlin Clark's been great, and her, her stats are gone way up. But Caitlin has never been better. And you just titled Caitlin has never been better.
And then comes this line, Caitlin has never been better. Never been better. Let's actually examine what that means, because it's not a throwaway phrase. It's attempting to rewrite the entire 2024 college basketball season. The article acknowledges that Paige is taking a big leap this season in the WNBA, that her production is up significantly, but then pivots to claim that somehow Caitlin Clark was never actually better than Paige Beckers at any point. Not during Iowa's run to back-to-back national championship games. Not when Caitlin was breaking every scoring record in sight. Never. That's not analysis. That's historical revisionism designed to support a predetermined conclusion.
Of 3 stars, took down Paige Beckers with an entire team of WNBA players. An entire team of WNBA players. Paige Beckers had Aaliyah Edwards on that team. Paige Beckers had Nika Mule on that team. Again, the 6th pick in 2024. And who won that game? Oh, Iowa. Iowa did. There was zero argument in 2024 for Paige Beckers being better than Caitlin Clark.
Here's a fact that cannot be disputed. In the 2024 NCAA tournament, Caitlin Clark led a team with 3 legitimate stars against UConn, a team loaded with WNBA caliber players. Paige Bueckers had Aaliyah Edwards, who went 6th overall in the 2024 WNBA draft. She had Nika Moole, another WNBA player. She had a complete roster of elite talent around her. Iowa won that game, and it wasn't close in terms of individual impact. If you swap those 2 players, if you put Paige Bueckers on that Iowa roster, does Iowa even make the Final Four? The answer matters because it reveals who was actually carrying their team and who was benefiting from superior supporting talent.
Like, they don't even make a Final Four. Even if, like, you're saying your Caitlin's never been better, but yeah, also, she's a uniquely efficient offensive engine. You can still make the argument Paige is better right now. It's a flimsy argument. Paige is good enough that, yeah. You can make that argument. The problem, one of the big problems with Paige is that there's never consistent aggression. She has to choose to be aggressive.
The consistency problem with Paige Bueckers has always been about aggression. She has to choose to be aggressive. It's not her default setting, and that's a massive issue when you're trying to argue someone is the best guard in the league. The elite guards, the ones who define eras, don't toggle their aggression on and off based on how they feel that night. Chelsea Gray averaged 12 points per game last season, and people want to call her the best point guard in the league when she hasn't played actual point guard in years. She's been a wing player running the offense. The standards we apply seem to shift dramatically depending on who we're evaluating.
Aggressive. There might come a time. Paige, if you want to say most skilled guard. Cool. I'm not going to argue too much with that. I think there's an argument to be made there. I think you probably do look at Olivia Miles in that regard. But I don't hate the argument that Paige Bueckers is the most skilled guard. Like, I think Paige has less flaws in her game than Caitlin Clark. But no one has ever judged a superstar by the holes in their game.
Now, is there an argument for Paige Bueckers as the most skilled guard? Sure, that's a different conversation entirely. Most skilled doesn't mean best. It means technically proficient, fewer holes in the fundamental game, cleaner mechanics. And yes, you could make a case that Paige has fewer technical flaws than Caitlin Clark. But here's the thing about superstar evaluation that people constantly miss. Nobody has ever judged a superstar by the holes in their game. Michael Jordan had weaknesses. LeBron James had weaknesses. Every dominant player in history had aspects of their game that weren't perfect. What made them great was the peaks, not the absence of valleys. Paige might have fewer flaws, but Caitlin has higher peaks, and in superstar evaluation, peaks matter more.
Total of 0 playoff wins. Like, it is what it is. Like, what are we still going to pretend the 12 point per game Chelsea Gray is the best point, who plays on the wing, is the best point guard in the league? That's the only thing. They're like, oh look, it's a point guard. I'm like, she hasn't played point guard in years. She literally has not played point guard in years.
Let's talk about playoff success, since that always comes up in these debates. The 3 best guards in the league right now, Caitlin Clark, Paige Bueckers, and Olivia Miles, have a combined 0 playoff wins. So if we're using team success as the measuring stick, none of them have proven anything yet at the professional level, which means we have to evaluate based on individual performance, impact metrics, and what they actually do on the court. And when you do that honest evaluation, the case for Paige being better than Caitlin falls apart completely.
2 of 3 best guys in the league. Olivia Miles is there. They are literally 2 of the 3 best. But we've randomly got a paragraph. Caitlin Clark has never been better. We cannot rewrite history. There is no argument in 2024 that Paige Bueckers was better than Caitlin Clark. There was none whatsoever. If you think a Paige in 2024 was better than Caitlin Clark, you are crazy. You are crazy. Like, she was all W first team, Caitlin Clark.
Here's where the argument gets truly absurd. The claim that in 2024, during their college seasons, there was somehow a legitimate debate about who was better. Caitlin Clark was All-American first team. She averaged 31 points per game. She orchestrated an offense that reached the national championship game. And the counter argument is what? Exactly, that Paige's team was better? Team success doesn't override individual dominance when the gap is this wide. You cannot look at what Caitlyn accomplished in 2024 and seriously argue that Paige was the better player. You just can't, unless you're working backward from a conclusion you've already decided on.
Like, this is mad. Like, I actually cannot believe. And that is the narrative that is being now pushed. The Paige was always better. And if you want to say Paige was better when they were 17 years old, you got me. You got me, because she was. Paige Bueckers was the better player when she was 17 years old. There are players that I was better than at 17 years old that are playing pro. That are playing pro overseas and have had pro careers. There are players I made a national team over that have traveled the world playing high-level basketball. There's guys that went D1, high-level D2 that I made a national team over at one stage in my life.
The historical comparison angle is instructive here. When Paige Bueckers was 17 years old, yes, she was better than Caitlin Clark. Absolutely true. Paige was the more advanced player at that age, but using that as evidence for anything current is absurd. There are players who made national teams at certain points in their careers who never went on to have professional success. There are guys who were ranked higher than Russell Westbrook in middle school who never made it past Division II college basketball. Early development curves don't predict final destinations. What matters is who you are now, not who you were at 17. And right now, in the WNBA, the idea that Paige Bueckers has surpassed Caitlin Clark requires ignoring everything we've seen on the court.
I was on YouTube on Instagram who makes like the 3-on-3. He's like trying to go pro in 3-on-3 in his mid-30s. And he always jokes about it. And he's like, here's our middle school rankings where I was top 3 in the country and I stopped growing. And for some reason, I was ranked higher than Russell Westbrook because he was top 5 in middle school. They kept him top 100. They kept him as like a top 100 recruit and he was ranked higher than Russell Westbrook. Like, it doesn't matter.
The narrative being pushed by certain segments of the fan base is that Paige's teammates are sabotaging her legacy, that if only she had better players around her, we'd see her true potential. But that narrative existed in college too, and it didn't hold up under scrutiny. Paige had elite teammates at UConn. She had WNBA draft picks surrounding her. And yes, she played well, but she didn't dominate the way Caitlyn dominated with less talent around her. At some point, the excuses have to stop and we have to evaluate what's actually happening on the floor. And what's happening is that Paige is a very good player who might become great, but she's not there yet. Caitlyn is already there.
By one game, let's not forget some of the shit that Sydney Taylor did to Indiana.
So let's address the elephant in the room. Why is this narrative being pushed so hard? Why are we seeing articles trying to make a case that doesn't hold up to basic scrutiny? Because there's a segment of basketball media and fandom that decided long ago who they wanted to be the face of women's basketball, and reality didn't cooperate. They wanted Paige Bueckers to be the transcendent star. They invested in that narrative early. And when Caitlin Clark exploded onto the scene and became the biggest story in women's basketball, it created cognitive dissonance. Rather than accept that their prediction was wrong, they're trying to retroactively justify it. Here's what makes this particularly frustrating for anyone who cares about honest basketball analysis. Paige Bueckers is an excellent player. She's going to have a great WNBA career. She might win championships. She might make multiple all-star teams. None of that requires tearing down Caitlin Clark or pretending that 2024 didn't happen the way it happened. You can appreciate Paige's skill set without rewriting history. You can acknowledge her improvements this season without pretending she was always better. But that's not what's happening. Instead, we get articles with headlines about the case for Paige Bueckers that don't actually make a coherent case. The efficiency argument falls apart when you account for passiveness. The better in her role argument contradicts the best guard claim. The never been better assertion ignores an entire season of evidence. What you're left with is a narrative in search of supporting facts, rather than facts leading to a conclusion. And that's backwards. That's not how analysis works. That's advocacy disguised as analysis. Think about what we actually saw in 2024. Caitlin Clark carried Iowa to the national championship game with a supporting cast that was good but not elite. She broke scoring records. She changed how defenses had to approach entire games. She made her teammates better in ways that don't show up in assist numbers. Meanwhile, Paige Buchers played well on a very talented UConn team that lost to that Iowa team in a game where the gap between the two stars was evident. That happened. We all watched it happen. And now we're supposed to pretend it didn't? The defense argument doesn't help Paige either. The article tries to suggest she's a better defender, but the reality is both players are below average defensively at this stage of their careers. Neither one is a traffic cone, but neither one is locking anybody down either. So if defense is a wash and offense is where Caitlin has the clear advantage in terms of volume, creation, and impact, where exactly is Paige better? Efficiency? Only if you ignore the passive mistakes that don't show up in turnover stats. Decision making. Caitlin makes harder decisions more frequently because she's asked to do more. Here's what this debate really reveals. It reveals how uncomfortable some people are with the idea that Caitlin Clark is the best guard in women's basketball right now. Not because of anything she's done wrong, but because she wasn't supposed to be. The narrative was written years ago, and she didn't follow the script. She was supposed to be very good. She became transcendent. She was supposed to be a scorer. She became a complete offensive engine. She was supposed to peak in college. She's translating everything to the professional level. And that's created a crisis for people who invested heavily in a different story. The comparison to other guards in WNBA history is instructive. When Diana Taurasi was at her peak, nobody needed to write articles making the case for her. It was obvious. When Sue Bird was running the Storm's offense, you didn't need statistical deep dives to prove she was elite. You could see it. The best players don't need cases made for them. Their play makes the case, and right now, Caitlin Clark's play is making a very clear case. The fact that articles are being written to argue against that case tells you everything you need to know about the strength of the counter-argument. Paige Buchers is having a good WNBA season. Her numbers are up. She's showing growth. That's all legitimately positive and worth celebrating. But having a good season doesn't mean you're suddenly better than the player who's been dominant for longer and is still dominant now. Improvement is great. Improvement doesn't equal surpassing. If Paige improves from a 70 to an 85 and Caitlin stays at 95, Paige got better, but she's still not the best. That's not complicated math. The most skilled versus best distinction matters here. You can absolutely argue Paige is more fundamentally sound in certain areas. Her shooting mechanics might be cleaner, her decision-making might have fewer high-risk moments, her game might have fewer obvious holes. All of that can be true, and she can still not be the best guard. Because best isn't about minimizing weaknesses. Best is about maximizing impact. And impact isn't just what you do well, it's what you make possible for your team that wouldn't be possible without you. On that measure, Caitlin wins decisively. The aggressive versus passive mistake framework is crucial to understanding this debate. When Paige doesn't take a shot because the defense is crowding her, that's a passive mistake. It doesn't show up as a missed field goal. It doesn't hurt her efficiency numbers. But it absolutely hurts her team because now the shot clock is running down and someone else has to create something from nothing. When Caitlin takes a contested three because the offense broke down and someone needs to make a play, sometimes she misses. That shows up in her efficiency stats. But the alternative was a shot clock violation, or an even worse shot. Aggressive mistakes are visible, passive mistakes are invisible, but both hurt your team. The role player versus superstar distinction is the final piece of this puzzle. Role players can be perfect within their role. They can execute their assignments flawlessly. They can have great efficiency numbers because they're only taking the shots the system generates for them. Superstars create outside the system. They make plays that aren't drawn up. They take responsibility when everything else fails. And yes, that means their efficiency takes a hit. That means their stats look messier. But that's the price of being the player who has to carry the load. Paige is being evaluated like a role player who executes well. Caitlin is being held to superstar standards. And then people wonder why Paige's numbers look cleaner. So where does this leave us? With a debate that shouldn't exist being kept alive by people who can't accept that their preferred narrative didn't pan out. Paige Buchers is an excellent player with a bright future. Caitlin Clark is the best guard in women's basketball right now, and has been for the last 2 years. Both of those things can be true. Both of those things are true. The only question is whether we're going to be honest about it or keep pretending that efficiency stats and role optimization somehow override 2 years of dominance. I know which side of that debate the evidence supports. The question is whether everyone else is ready to accept it.